This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World. Hello, JJ Meets World listener. If this is the first episode, welcome. If this is your 100th episode, welcome back. Our guest today is Academy Award winner Richard Edlund. He's the man who designed the special effects, the visual effects for movies like Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Ghostbusters, Die Hard, and the list goes on and on and on and on. This man shaped your childhood. He shaped the way your imagination perceives things in movies. Oh my gosh, this is a big deal for us. And I think you're also going to hear some very interesting stories and find out about how the imagination of a guy who was born in Fargo, North Dakota, led to some of the most iconic movies of all time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
When I was a kid, the first time I saw the movie Gremlins, it scared the bejesus out of me. And I remember, even today when I watch that movie, which has become one of my favorite movies, I still get...
Yeah, it only gets mentioned on the podcast about once every other episode.
Yeah, right? I maybe mentioned quite a bit about Gremlins. I've got a feeling. Now, that feeling... I get a similar feeling from other movies from my childhood, because when you experience something as a kid and it grabs your imagination and just kind of shakes it, it really, it kind of changes you a little bit, right? And there are the people out there, we're seeing that now with the Star Wars universe, where the fans of the Star Wars universe are now being given the keys to the kingdom to create something new. So Gremlins 3, should it ever happen, will be probably helmed by someone who saw Gremlins when they were a little kid. And if you get a franchise where you're lucky enough to interact with someone who's a part of the original one, and you treat them with the respect that they deserve, you can really see something magical take place.
You've really gamed this out in your head.
I have a lot,
but it matters to you, and that's why.
It's big time. In fact, you're a Star Trek fan, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I was thinking about this when we were getting a chance to interview today's guest, Richard Edlund, Academy Award winner in the realm of special effects.
You know, he worked on Star Wars, right?
Right.
Okay.
But I know you're a Star Trek fan, at heart.
Yeah.
in Star Trek Generations.
Okay.
When they invite the old crew onto the maiden voyage of the new Enterprise.
Right. I believe it's Kirk, it's Scotty, and it's Walter Koenig, Chekhov.
Yep. And everyone on deck is excited because they are there, and they're not there to lead it, right?
Right.
They are there to kind of pass the torch.
Almost.
Yeah.
I mean, Kirk is a little begrudging, if I remember correctly.
He is. He's certainly. In fact,
wants his ship back.
It's the one because doesn't he talks to Bones beforehand about like how it's kind of he feels like he's being put out to pasture, right?
Well, I don't think Bones is in that one. Maybe he is. Maybe it is.
Don't
Bones
they have like a
around
drink before I don't remember.
I'll have to go back and watch it. I guess I'm not as big of a Star Trek fan as I thought I was.
As you thought you were. But that I think is it's an interesting feeling where you respect the past while moving on to the future. And so many of the franchises that Richard Edlund was a part of have gone on 30, 40 years later.
They defined cinema. I mean, they really did. Any pop culture that gets made now and that's an action movie of any type is basically got Star Wars DNA in it, which of course had previous things before it as well. But everything kind of that's the high watermark as far as it seems. What am I trying to say here? It changed the game in a way that I don't think we've seen anything change the game since then. We've seen cosmic shifts in cinema and technique, but I don't think anything had the kind of meteoric impact that Star Wars did. And Richard was absolutely integral to that. And what I thought was super interesting when we talked to him, and he's talking about his time in the Navy and filming, ships, doing different stuff. You just got to imagine that creeps into Star Wars in some way.
It'd be interesting to see some of the films he shot while part of the Navy to see see how like the way this torpedo shoots out like this. We saw this exact same shot, from an X-wing.
Right. And we should say too, the reason Richard was in Fargo in the first place, he was born in Fargo, lived here until he was in the 6th grade. And then he got invited back here for the 2019 Fargo Film Festival to receive the Ted M. Larson Award. And I know for Greg, who is the other guest today, Greg Carlson, repeat JJ Meets World guest, it was a real...
He's like the John Goodman to SNL of JJ Meets World.
Right.
He might as well be a cast member.
We have to double check, but between him and Kevin Kennedy. We're not positive because Kevin Kennedy's had a good number as well. But I know that having Richard in town here was a very, I'm going to say the term again, high watermark for Greg, because he got to interview Richard on the stage at the Fargo Theater, which was where Greg first saw Star Wars in 1977. So that was which was the movie that really solidified his love for cinema and got him on the path he was into. So this whole episode is like just loaded with meaning for us and for Greg.
It's pretty neat. I also tell a story about a bad and ill-fated sleepover from my youth that Greg then that night told to a room of 800 people. So imagine that. And you might say, like, well, you put it on a podcast. A podcast is different than 800 people laughing at you.
You get to control the narrative yourself.
Yeah. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this. Richard Edlund, kind enough to give us even more time than we had even asked for. This episode of JJ Meets World is... I mean, this is a next step for us too. Yep. This guest is world famous. People like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas keep him in their cell phone when they've got a question to ask. So, folks, enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with Richard Edlund, and remember, our Patreon account is patreon.com/JJ Meets World.
JJ Meets World.
So I was kind of disappointed because I thought, because I had read somewhere that you were raised in Fergus Falls. I'm like, sure, born in Fargo, raised in Fergus Falls. Good. Let's write that wrong right here. So, born in Fargo, raised in Fargo.
Yeah, up until the middle of the 6th grade.
And so that made you go to what elementary school then?
Agassiz.
Agassiz? That's
I lived on 11th Street South, 11th and 10th, approximately.
I live 2 blocks away from where you used to live right now.
And I used to walk backwards into the wind going to school when it was 19 below.
It made you a hardy person, though,
I know,
didn't it?
It did. It made me believe. It made me into a believer. That's true.
Years later, when people were complaining about, like 45-degree weather in L.A. being, the closest thing you can get to the Ice Age, would you turn around and say, like, listen, when I went to 5th grade, I was walking in the wind, and it was 19 below.
Yeah, with my face wrapped in a scarf. But, because it was painful, and you had to breathe slowly because it was painful.
Oh, I know that so well.
But anyhow, I'm so bored with L.A. weather because every day it's sunny. You get sick of that after a while.
I can imagine.
Oh, I wish it would snow here.
How much snow would you be cool with, though? At what point?
Oh, 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah. You said, hey, we've still got some snow on the ground. You were glad to see that snow.
I was hoping that it hadn't all melted off already.
Mm-hmm.
So, Richard, how do you end up in Fargo till 6th grade and then having the amazing, accomplishing career that you did in the movies?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to my dad, who basically, the company he was working for in Fargo was starting to wane, and so he had to find some other job, and he was in the truck body business, and basically, so what we did is go to Minneapolis. So he figured that he might be able to find something in Minneapolis. So he went to Minneapolis, and while he was in Minneapolis looking for a job, I was staying with my grandparents in Fergus Falls. And I went to Lincoln School there for half a year. And so, I mean, it was a great childhood. I mean, every school year, I went to school in Fargo. And the last day of school, we were packed up and ready to go to Otter Tail Lake. And I spent the summers in the water at Otter Tail Lake, And
you swam at the Island Park pool in Fargo, right?
Yeah, I did.
And what are some of the other early Fargo landmarks you remember?
Fargo land. Well, the A&P. The NP station. When I was 8 or 9, Harry Truman came through on a whistle stop, so I got to see the president that beat Dewey, and. So I had a really good time in Fargo, and actually my parents' best friends were Walt Schramm, who was the leading photographer at the time in Fargo, and he had a studio just across the tracks. There was a building, the first building on Broadway, and he had a second-story photographic studio, and he used to come and visit with his retouching artist Marion, and they were like an item. I mean, we didn't talk about that then. I mean, they weren't married, but probably. So anyway,
friendly,
and so she was quite a dish too. Nice dark-haired lady, and so they would come out to the lake, and he would bring his 4x5 camera. So I have these great photos of me as a kid on my way to. And then my dad, we moved to Minneapolis. I did 7th and 8th grade there, and then that wasn't working out so well. And then my uncle and my mom's sister moved. My aunt, they moved out to Covina in California, and so he decided, well, let's try Los Angeles. And so we moved out here out there, being here and not there. And he got a good job in a company in Montebello, and so I wound up going to school there, and I got involved in photography. I had a really great photographic teacher there, and I was taking photographs of I got involved with the LA Examiner Scholastic Sports Association, which enabled me to go from school to school. I photographed it most all of the schools in LA. Football, basketball, track, cheerleaders. I did some, cheesecake cheerleader shots, and then I in high school I heard about this day in the Navy through the Examiner, and they sent us out on this recruitment campaign that the Navy had put on. and they had like a cruiser and 2 destroyers that went out about 30 miles, nautical miles, and then, and as they've been told. And so basically, there was a submarine that came by, and then it fired torpedoes, so we saw torpedoes shooting through there. They were dropping depth charges over the fantail, at which point I was unluckily straddling the 5-inch gun. I felt like I got kicked in the nuts. But anyway, I know you'll have to clean that up.
Nuts is fine.
Don't worry. Yeah, we can make that work.
But anyway,
my son can hear that.
A week later, I had such a great time. I was with my friend Wally Moore. We were the chief photographers for the SSA. And so basically, we both joined the Navy the next week.
And you were only 17.
I was 17. My parents approved, and I turned 18 in boot camp. So basically, I was a kiddie cruiser, which meant that I only had to serve 3 years. And the first year was almost completely at boot camp, prep school in Norman, Oklahoma. Navy had a Navy base in Oklahoma. Figure that one out. It was Naval Air. But anyway, and then I wound up going to the Naval Photographic School in Pensacola.
And that had to have been one heck of an education, too.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine you were learning from people who were bringing back real-time war footage from back in the day, passing that skill on.
Yeah, the Naval Photographic System was pretty intense. And basically, I had to first go to Norman to learn. They had this intense school that you had to go through. It was an operational clerical, because it's an operation clerical rate, and you had to go to this prep school, and I had to go from polynomials to calculus, learn all the laws of physics, learn the naval supply system and how to order things, I had to be able to identify ship silhouettes, aircraft silhouettes, type 25 words a minute. And all this in 6 weeks. We had tests every other day, and it was a fantastic experience.
That sounds amazing.
It was like this funnel of knowledge just being pumped into my brain.
Do you think you could still identify some of that era aircraft by silhouette?
Probably could.
That's good. Then they taught you well. It's sticking with you.
If it came to it, I would, I'd be able to pull it out. But then I went to Naval Photographic School in Pensacola, and on the way I flew in my first aircraft from Pensacola to Houston in an old DC-3, and then took a train from Houston to Pensacola down through the bayous, the southern Texas and the bayous, and through Louisiana, Mississippi, and on through to Florida. And when I got to Houston, they had the colored waiting rooms, colored drinking fountains, the whistle stop thing. No colored were allowed inside. And this is all mystery to me, because I had black friends and Mexican friends and all kinds of different colored friends in L.A., and we didn't think about that kind of stuff here. But it was amazing to see that. And when I was in Pensacola, when I was in New Orleans, we had a 2-hour train delay there, and so we went out and checked out Bourbon Street, and couldn't do much more than look at the outsides of the buildings. But we were walking down the street, and there was this old black man that saw us coming, and he got off the street and was walking got off the sidewalk and was walking in the street.
So that had to have been a real culture shock.
It was.
And a real change.
And then when we went through, we stopped at every train station. It was a whistle stop thing, and we stopped at all these train stations with these antebellum train stations that had the hexagonal tile floors and the beautiful walnut finished carpentry, and then the black folk had to wait outside next to the track.
Did that? You're painting a pretty vivid picture. So this must have been something that stayed with you for a long time.
Absolutely. It was a great experience, and then I spent the time in Florida, studying somewhat, because I already knew that stuff pretty much. I was a pretty accomplished photographer already. Played a lot of pool.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
We've got the largest pool hall in the Western Hemisphere in North Dakota, in Fargo now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to go check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. A lot of people make a pilgrimage every single year there.
All right.
And I only know that because I helped them with the marketing, so I know all of the words.
Well, they had a pool hall like that in Oklahoma City. I used to take on the weekends. I'd go into Oklahoma City, and they had one of these fantastic old pool halls like they had in the Hustler.
Yeah.
Where they had the sunken deal with the bleachers around the side of it, and the pool table down there, and they had the 6x12 snooker tables. I mean, it was a fantastic pool hall.
It would make sense with your military photography experience how that might affect the DNA of Star Wars, but I'm kind of bummed there was no pool scene in the Mos Eisley Cantina.
What was the equivalent of
That's
the pool?
right. It could have been very weird.
Yeah.
Weird shaped pool.
Yeah, but when you think about how you put your eye line when you get down there and when you're going to hit the cue ball,
That's true.
like that. I mean, that's an eye.
There's visual layout going
You got
on.
to play the angles, and when you're doing bank shots.
Right, you're counting the diamonds, aren't you? On the side of the table.
I usually won.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did you have like a pool hustler name?
No, but there was this pool hustler that was always trying to get me to play for money. And I knew he was a hustler, because I'd play him every once in a while, and I'd usually beat him, but not always.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
What was the movie you were on where you lost a game because you sank the 8?
When I did many years later, when I did Multiplicity with Harold Ramis and Michael Keaton's playing 4 parts, and we had motion control scenes for the first shot. And then all the other scenes had to fit into that scene, and we had a trailer full of computer geeks and artists that would do composites between the takes, so that Harold could see the first 2 takes composited together, and then we would do the third. And then he'd see that one composited on. Then he'd see the fourth, and they had no idea what was going on inside this 40-foot trailer,
They just think it's just happening. It's
So because it took so much work, you had time to shoot some pool.
Well, because it took 45 minutes for for Michael to change character and change makeup and wardrobe. Rather than sitting around on the stage, Harold had a pool table put in, and so we'd shoot pool between takes.
Well, you got to keep busy somehow, right?
That's right.
What was Harold's
And the
pool
thing is,
game?
if you lost, then you had to call winners, and it might be 3 or 4 more takes if you'd have to wait out. So I didn't want to lose.
Sure.
How good was Ramis at pool?
Harold was pretty good. Yeah.
Earlier today,
And then we had a rap party at a pool hall, because we were all pool nuts by then, and so there were like quite a number of it was like a football thing, and we people would play each other, and then the winners of those would have to play two of the
Put together your own tournament, huh?
Tournament.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for. And so, as it turned out, I was like the winner on one side, one of the
Bracket.
sets, and there was a girl that somehow was the one that won on the other side. And then when I'm playing her, I ran all the solids off, and she hadn't made a ball yet. And so I snookered myself on the 8 ball and lost.
I was going to say that earlier today. I asked, we were talking with some students, and we listed some of the names of these giants that you've worked with closely: George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Mike Nichols, and on and on. And I said, "Who's the nicest person in Hollywood?"
Harold Ramis. May he rest in peace. He was such a great man.
I had an opportunity. So I went to Second City. I was a Second City guy in
really?
Chicago, and I got to meet him at the 50th anniversary.
Oh, he's great.
He was the type of guy where I was starstruck talking to him, being that he was in SCTV, of course, things like Ghostbusters, the things I grew up with. And he was more interested in who I was as a person. And I had never met
Harold,
that. It was amazing.
Because he was always trying to learn, And he had, he had the joke before the Second City was he was the curator of jokes for Playboy.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a great job, right? I mean, that's something you put on your resume for sure.
JJ happens to be a huge fan of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And if you tell JJ what you have in your personal collection, he might pass out right now. You should tell him what you have.
Well, what I don't have is stuff that I sold. I mean, I had like these lever things for the Marshmallow Man, and the latex was all gone, but there were pieces left. I had a warehouse full of stuff for 10 years, and among those I had Gozer Temple.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And, I mean, which is like 12 feet tall.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
And I had, I had like the haunted house from Tales from the Crypt, the opening shot that we did with Zemeckis.
Oh, I'm very familiar with that as well.
And so I mean it was, I had a lot of stuff and a lot of big stuff, and so it was 1,000 feet with a mezzanine.
Wow.
And then after about 10 years, I'm thinking, this is costing me about $12,000 a year. I mean, is this what am I doing this for?
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to clear out the warehouse.
Yeah, liquidate some of that stuff.
Yeah, and turn it into Gitas.
Some greenbacks.
And so I made about $200,000 in auction sales.
So okay,
it probably cost $2 million or something like that to make all that stuff.
So I want to dive into this as part of it, and of course, Tucker and Greg, you guys hop in on this thing too. But so when you've had a career that's as accomplished as yours, you talk about you've got a huge warehouse full of stuff. Are there things nowadays people don't throw away, at least to my knowledge, they're not throwing away as many things as they used to. So just letting them walk away and end up in collections, because I know Warner Brothers likes to do on their tour, they curate museums with a lot of these things. They're not throwing away stuff from the Harry Potter series because it's going to be worth money one day. But some of this stuff it has a very finite shelf life. You talk about latex. I've seen foam creatures that over 20 years, the foam breaks down. Is that something that people in your career are looking at? How do we preserve some of these pieces of history?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, for example, one of the things that I sold a bunch of stuff from Fright Night, and we had some angel wings, and we had some bat wings, and we had this bat that flew down the wire, and that stuff sold at auction, and it was flaking and falling apart. But it was bought by Tom Holland, who was the director of Fright Night. So Tom bought a bunch of that stuff, and then he paid these model guys to rebuild it. And so you can do that, and then maybe the next guy that gets it, because it's a classic. I mean, Fright Night is one of the great classic modern modern.
It's great, fantastic vampire film.
And the humor of Fright Night is so good.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the remake so much.
No, that sucked.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you can say that.
It's like, why did they do that? They did that with Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they try to remake a classic like that with the same story and third-rate actors?
Was it Ebert who said, "Why don't they remake bad movies instead of good movies? Like they're always remaking the good ones.
Right.
Remake a bad one and make it into a good one.
Make it good the second time around."
Like White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. I'd love to see that remake.
Right.
It's a terrible movie.
Or Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yes, I would watch that. I guess it would make sense though too that now
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Yeah, absolutely. Glenn or Glenda would love that.
My favorite.
But also now that there's been this massive transition from special practical effects to computer effects, I mean, there just aren't even as many assets that could be stored somewhere that aren't just completely digital now compared to what it used to be, besides maybe costume pieces and some simple hand props.
Though interestingly, First Man won this last year, and it won I mean, there were a lot of miniatures. I mean, Ian Hunter built a lot of that stuff in miniature, and then that landscape, the moonscape, which I thought, God, what a great miniature that is. It wasn't a miniature. They actually dressed a field like that, lit it with one massive light, you know, and with the cameras having the sensitivity they have nowadays, they could shoot it and get depth of field, and that was a great looking movie. But I mean, the booster rockets and all those parts, that was all miniatures.
Really?
So you can actually, and the thing that happens with miniatures that doesn't happen with the digital world is the happy accident. The thing that happens during shooting that makes it into a much more interesting shot because it's something that came to mind, you know, all of a sudden, or it's something that happened that shouldn't have happened that actually looks better. I mean, all these kind of things happen in the analog world that don't, because in the digital world you have to design everything. Nothing happens unless it's thought about first.
One of the examples you gave of the happy accident was with the cloud tank.
Yeah,
and I love that story because to me, and if the listeners don't know, you can tell them what a cloud tank is in shorthand, because I always geek out. It's my favorite kind of visual effect.
Well, the guys that pioneered that were on Close Encounters. Actually, I mean, it was
beautiful.
Hoyt Yateman and what's his name? I'll think of it in a minute. Scott Squires. So those two guys were the two young Turks that worked with Trumbull on that. And basically what you do with a cloud tank is you fill it up. First of all, it's about a 6 foot square and 5 foot deep tank, and it's maybe 1.5 inches thick glass because the
refraction of light. You don't want to have
it's
that.
It's just the weight of water.
Sure.
You know, if you make it thinner, it'll just break. So it's made out of, you know, steel. It's a steel weldment with steel corners,
and you're putting sheets of
glass in, and then silicone, and once you have the tank, you fill the tank half full of filtered water that has been saturated with salt. So it's a saline saturated solution. Once you get that in there, you put a piece of plastic on the surface of it, and then you carefully fill the rest of the tank with clear water, fresh water. Then you carefully roll the plastic up, take it out, and what you have now is an inversion layer that's going to stay that way for quite a while. And so then we had this atomic arm, we called it. It's like a parallelogram. You can basically move this back here, and it moves the squirting device on the other end the way you want. And you can actually scale that also. You can scale the motion to where you move here and it moves faster, or you can move faster here and it's slower. So all of this kind of stuff is tweakable. And then you squirt basically it's basically tempera paint through jets in a tube, and you squirt that over the surface, and they're unequal size and they're just a little bit different in each one. So you get a cloud formation that rolls towards you, and one day. By the way, I mean, so you can get great clouds like the evil-looking clouds in Poltergeist.
Like in Independence Day too. Is that the same kind of cloud look? That
I don't know. Probably
the same thing.
Probably. I don't remember Independence Day. But anyway, when one day we were on Raiders, we were working on a cloud sky, and there was this drain pipe in the middle of the bottom of the tank, and it was like a fire hose. It was like 3-inch diameter fire hose letting the water out. And while it was happening, somebody stepped on the fire hose, and it caused a gush of clear water to shoot back up into the tank, and it blew a hole in the clouds. And I thought, fantastic. That's what we need for when the Ark blows off into the sky. And so that's how we discovered that through a happy accident, and it was a great shot where you see the Ark go tumbling up and the cloud the sky is opening up. I mean, it's magic,
So magic, right? So magic happens every day when it comes to the movies, and especially when you're building with stuff. Do people come up to you all the time and ask you how you accomplish certain shots? And then are you a little bit like a magician?
All the time.
Do you ever keep some of those things close to the chest and leave that for your own secret?
Occasionally, but for the most part, once you've done it, it's easy to reverse engineer it. And so if you're first to do it, then read them and weep. It's like you lay out your royal flush, and so I mean, the thing is, once you've done it and it hasn't been done before, then you can claim it, and you can't patent it. Probably could, but it would cost you more than it's worth. So
who are your visual effects? Who are your visual effects heroes? I know you mentioned, Willis O'Brien.
Yeah, well, Willis O'Brien was a great earlier stop motion guy. There was some really good. I think John Fulton at Paramount. Doing the Ten Commandments, the parting of the Red Sea.
And Harryhausen.
Well, Harryhausen too. I mean, I was not a real nut about Harryhausen. I mean, I think Harryhausen did a lot of good stuff, but his screenplays were like, he would use
sure.
He would take the Iliad and shoot it,
Yeah. And I'm thinking
and every frame that he shot got cut in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But how about some of the ones that were kind of working at the same time you were working, like Trumbull?
Well, Trumbull's a very, very talented guy. I'm thinking about Al Whitlock, a matte painter. Mm-hmm. I shot the first matte painting that he did when he came over from England, because he was a student of Percy Day, who was the prime matte painter in England, and actually I think Harrison Ellenshaw was his nephew, and Peter Ellenshaw was his brother. So the Ellenshaws in the days were, I'm not brother, they were like blood relatives, and so I'm not sure exactly which relative they were, but they were close relatives, and they all had similar talents, and so there were those guys.
Do you have a lot of young people coming up to you today saying, gosh, I want to get into the effects industry, and they've got a reel on their phone of something that they've done, and they want to show you?
Well, the thing is, I'm not hiring these days. I'm kind of off doing other things right now. But I think that if somebody wants to get into the movie business or in the visual effects business, which is getting tougher and tougher because there's more and more super talented people clamoring to get in, that are coming out of like 100 schools, and I remember seeing the animation magazine, and there were page after page of schools that had animation studies and visual effects. So the business is being populated by a lot of talented people, but at the same time, if you look at the roll-ups of the credits of, let's say, Avatar, they're like 5 or 6 columns wide, and they're going by at 35 miles an hour. And if your name is in there, you have to hit a hold frame in order to find it. So there's like 2,000 people working on the show. So the business has expanded. As opposed to Star Wars, which we had like 60 or 70 or 80 maybe people, not at the same time, working on the show. Usually it's about 50 or 60. And in 2 years, we did 365 optical composites with all the miniature work, $2.5 million. And I mean, that was like 40 years ago. So, I mean, now, I mean, the effects on Avatar were upwards of 120 million.
So they really should learn budgeting from you, is what you're saying.
Well, I'd just say that part of the art of visual effects is the art of spending money.
Yeah.
How much does it change then when filmmakers today don't have the same kind of limitations that they used to, i.e., when you were working on Star Wars, I mean, technology had to be invented, techniques had to be invented to get some of the shots you were talking about, and there was limitations on what you just could do, and therefore you were forced to come up with creative solutions for those limitations versus a computer where you can call up 1 million spaceships at one moment and give them AI to do whatever you need them to do and then just let them go.
You can't quite give them AI to do everything yet. But beware of AI, because AI will change the world. And some of the biggest chip makers are investing heavily into this area now because they want to come up with more goods that they can sell to the multitudes, you know.
Well, do you felt that you benefited from the limitations that you had at that time?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think limitations lead to invention, and inventions is how you make something that hasn't been seen before. So, yes, I think limitations are important to have.
You said earlier that audiences today made up of young people are spoiled because they've seen everything.
That's
you can see, you used Aquaman as an example, where every shot, the entire thing is a visual effect.
Yeah.
And that isn't special compared to Star Wars.
Well, that's the problem. The problem that you have is that because now you can do anything, and because so much that has been invented is seminal inventions that now have subtle emanations. The audience, the young audience, because you can do everything, the young audience has already seen everything. And because they've already seen everything, nothing is necessarily that new to them. So therefore, the director is saddled with the problem of coming up with stuff that hasn't been done before, which is really hard to do. And so they basically, it's this wham bang in your face kind of Michael Bay approach to visual effects.
You know what I don't see today that I loved from movies are a good explosion. I don't think that anyone's doing explosions justice to the way that they used to be. I lived in Chicago when they were filming one of the Transformers movies, and all they did was put rubble on the road. And then when I saw the movie later on and they had all these, big explosions in the back, and I said, well, a little pyrotechnics would have gone a long way to for what was going on. And it's got to be hard. I mean, I guess I don't know your opinion of actors in general, but it's got to be hard to act against to nothing when you're doing it for an entire movie.
Right. How do you react to a tennis ball on a stick?
Right. Mm-hmm. Versus being able to go and see a miniature that's being worked on and say, like, this is the scale. But at the same time,
I mean, when you see how much money we're spending, let's say Avatar again, Aquaman is an example. I mean, you have an actor that has very limited talent, in my opinion.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And he's surrounded by tens of millions of dollars, per paragraph of action. And so basically that fills in.
That is a phenomenal way of putting it. They are surrounded by millions of dollars of action on the page.
Right.
I've never thought about it like that, but that is 100% true. And then, of course, I always hate the we'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post. Why not just fix it right now?
Because it takes time to do that. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that a lot of these line producers will say, cut, move on, but we want to do this. It's going to cost more to do that up line. He says, I don't care, move on. Because the thing is that he's getting a bonus for bringing the movie in on time, And he doesn't care that it's going to cost
that is a bad
extra
incentive.
millions of dollars.
That is a bad incentive. At least it seems to be for. I understand from a budgetary
happens all
standpoint.
the time.
It seems counterintuitive
And the thing is
to
that the
creative.
studios kind of tend to agree with it because production time is really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, can you tell a story from a movie where you had an effect shot that you just, gosh, it just wasn't going the way you wanted. It wasn't going the way you wanted, and you had a breakthrough moment on it? Because I think that's the thing that I see with young filmmakers today is if they hit a wall, they just give up and they'll just figure it out later, so to speak.
I have a pretty good example of something that and this has to do with Multiplicity, the movie. And there was a shot in Multiplicity where he throws himself a can of beer. And we were bidding against Sony ImageWorks. And they're thinking about making it a CG beer can, and the guy has to catch a CG beer can. And I'm thinking, that's not a way to stage this. Let's stage it differently. And basically, I staged it in a way that the A scene is number 2 sitting on the couch, and he throws a beer can to number 3. And number 3 is a stand-in. And so then number 2's stand-in sits on the couch, and number 3 is in the shot, and he throws him the beer can, and number 3 catches it. The trick is that it went out of frame for like 4 or 5 frames, and then it comes back in. So you basically only had to make a jump cut. And so basically, it's basically a two-stage composite with a split screen, and you didn't have to have any digital stuff in there at all.
I love effects tricks like that.
So I mean, that saved a fortune, and we got the shot right away, and Harold's just in heaven because it worked so great, and the stand-ins that we had were real smart guys, and they took on the characteristic of their number 2 was kind of a macho guy, number 3 was kind of feminine guy, and number 4 is just a dumb shit.
Hi, Steve.
I like pizza.
This is the second time today I've had a conversation about Multiplicity, believe it or not. Not even knowing that this interview was going to happen.
Really?
Yeah. So I must be destined to go home and watch it this weekend.
Well,
and I'm going to watch that
yet?
beer scene. Oh no! I'm a big fan of Multiplicity.
That's a great movie.
It is. It's
there's
a great
another great
Eugene Levy role
There's
too.
another
by the way.
great shot in there, and the thing about it is, no, Bedazzled.
Okay.
Did
Yep.
you see the remake of Bedazzled?
Yep. With Elizabeth Hurley.
Yep,
Brendan Fraser. So one of the shots, Brendan, it was this play. He wants to play the 7'6" basketball player. So Brendan's already 6'3", so I had to make him about another foot taller, and so the magic number was 83%. So in other words, to make him look like a 7'6" guy, apparent in comparison to the other guys, is I would shoot the other guys at a certain camera height, and then when I would shoot him, I would move it down to 86% of the height. And so he would then he would appear taller, and so there was one scene that we had one of the stand-ins was really a talented basketball player, and we were looking for 6 foot and under basketball players, and wish me luck, because they're all towers,
yep.
right? Except, so Norm Nixon he was an ex-Laker, and he was our basketball guy. And so we basically, he had the wig that was just like Brendan, and so from the back, it looked just like Brendan Fraser. And so basically, there's this one shot where he's going to make a half-court shot. And he has an 83% basketball which cost $5,000.
Because it has to be scaled perfectly.
It had to be scaled down, and we had an 86% size hoop. And so that whole thing was made 86% of the size of a normal basketball. And we didn't do the 83% basketball court, but I mean, we still stayed with a full-size basketball court. And so he's here this guy is like 6 feet tall, very talented basketball player. He's got the 83% basket. He throws the basket, and he makes the shot.
What?
From half court, he makes the shot. The only problem is that it left the frame.
Oh.
It left the frame for like about 20 frames, and then comes back in, and then it lands in the basket and sticks. So we had to fix it, right? So I had to then, and we tiled the audience also. So the audience has like been tiled, and we shoot a section here, and then a section, and we had to tilt up off the audience into the rafters that weren't there, do a matte painting of that for 20 frames, tilt back down, so we keep and do a digital basket during that part of the shot, and then that worked perfect. Then we had to then get rid of the basket, or the ball in the basket that stuck, and then drop another basket, a CG basketball, through the hoop. And it was a great shot, and so that kind of thing happening is fabulous. There was another shot where he does a full shot, he does a full court alley-oop, and this guy throws the 83% ball all the way to the other end of the thing, and then there's a guy down there that does the alley-oop. And he was like perfect there. He was like 3 feet away from making it.
It's got some good aim.
And that was a moving shot that I did with a handheld camera.
Wow. So it's got to be just fascinating, because your entire career in movies has been it's been an upward tick in technology, but also taking also kind of respecting the past, right? Respecting the techniques, and figuring out just a way, like, okay, is there a different way that we can do this to accomplish the end goal?
Right.
Boy, it's got to be. So I'm curious to know your experience in the Navy.
Yeah.
Has that ever come into your effects
absolutely.
work?
Yeah. First of all, the Navy is where I got interested in movies. Because when I got to Atsugi, which during the war was the prime Japanese, that was like their SAC base, that was their primary aviation base, and when I got there, we had the Fleet Air Photo Lab, and there was about 40 of us in the Fleet Air Photo Lab, and I, at one point I discovered this camera, the Mitchell 16 millimeter camera in the warehouse, in the storeroom, that had been delivered and had been ordered by someone a few years ago, and then it was delivered, and then the guy got shipped out, and it never got opened.
Oh.
So here's this complete 16 millimeter Mitchell production camera, like sitting there waiting
brand new toy.
This toy was sitting there waiting to be played with. And so basically, I went to the base library, and I found a book called The Grammar of the Film, and it was an academic book about a study of the silent film, the Russian film, the found footage, Eisenstein, all the great Russian movies that had been made in the silent era, and which was great for me to learn because we didn't have any sound equipment at the lab. So I learned how to make a silent film and how to set up scenes, and it was just a great it was my Bible. I had kept it checked out for a year. And so anyway, that, and I made like training films. I did a training film in this lab down by Yokosuka near the ocean, where the transatlantic cable came out, or trans-Pacific cable came out.
Yeah.
And basically that came out into this base, and this is where all the top secret messages were going to come across the ocean, and this is like in 1960, and so I had one Japanese national as an actor. There was only one switch that I could pull because all the others were not. All the others were not in use, and I would be disrupting power. and the thing is that the Japanese power system was such that it fairly often, all of a sudden, the power would go out, and then you don't know when it's going to come back on. So they had like a whole series of generators, and they had a list of which is the priority list of do this one first, and then while this one's warming up, go turn this one off, and then when this one's warmed up, then you throw this switch, and it was that kind of a geeky film. But we had this guy running back and forth, and I had the camera down with a wide angle lens, and it was like Orson Welles, real sketchy lighting, because we only had a couple of lighting. I think we only had 3 lighting instruments, and it was ASA 80 film or something at that time, and so basically that's kind of how I got into movies, and then there was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. It was one of the squad leaders at the photo lab. And I was talking to him one night, and I was thinking I was going to go to Brooks Institute, which is a photographic school in Santa Barbara, and it was a pretty well-known school. And God, I can't remember his name. He was the only jarhead we were all sailors. He was the only Marine. Anyway, he was a good guy, and he said, "Edlund, you don't want to go to Brooks, you want to go to USC, man. They have the cinema department there, and it's probably the best cinema school in the world, because they teach you how to become a filmmaker in all different ways. I mean, you have to take writing, you have to take editing, you have to take cinematography, all these different courses in order to become a filmmaker. And you become a filmmaker, and then you decide, well, I want to be a production designer, or I want to be an editor, or I want to be a director, and so." And that's your.
So is that where you ended up at USC?
Yeah. So I sent them a letter and said I wanted to come there, and so they sent me the information, and that's where I did. When I got out of the Navy, I got a job at my dad's company. I was first fixing all the tools. Then I was designing. I got into designing refrigeration systems. Then I got into designing truck bodies, and I was doing this in the mornings. And then from 8 to 12, I worked, and then from 12 to 6, I studied, and then from 6 to, then I drove to USC, went to the classes, and I was taking like 20 units or something like that, and I was taking real heavy load because I wanted to get 3 school years compacted into 2, and so I finished all the material I needed to complete my junior year, and then I decided that I would forego the production year because I would have to transfer to day school, and my parents would have to fund it. And it was pretty expensive in those days.
Well, it's still pretty
but
expensive
nowhere
today.
Near what it is today.
So,
but anyway, so I then got a job in the business.
So did you spend a lot of time in movie theaters as a kid, or did that passion come from that experience you had starting off with a still camera and moving on to
It started with a still camera and moving on to movies. I mean, I always loved movies, and as a kid, I was telling this morning I saw the three movies that I remember, the pivotal ones were Bicycle Thief, which was a Italian neo-realist movie, and then there was the Robe, which was the first. Well, that was later. I mean, it was in Fargo. It was Destination Moon.
Okay. Yep.
George Pal, and then there was the other one was Wanna Devil, the 3D spear chucking movie.
Media in general is an industry that gets disrupted by technology now faster and faster almost every year. Certainly with your work, you were part of the earlier disruptions and, hey, here's a new technique, here's a new way, here's a new visual you can see. But are you able to now extrapolate out into the future a bit and think of, or even guess what types of new disruptions we might be seeing in the future? Or is it sort of the point now where everything's coming so fast and so quick?
Well, actually, I have a project that I'm working on with a couple of writers that they have a script. It's a series. It's for a TV, probably an 8-part series, like a Netflix series type of thing that tells the story of Cuba from the revolution to Kennedy's assassination time, from 1950, late 50s to 62, 3. And we have to resurrect Kennedy, Jackie, Meyer Lansky, Castro in various states, but convincing. So right now we're working on an AI program that will enable us to teach the computer the personality of these different characters by going back through footage that we find. And it's a very complex process, but rewarding, because it would be pretty fascinating to resurrect these characters, and the script is really a great script, and it actually works backwards. The first script is the actual end of Cuba, and then it goes back and where this one begins, the last one ends. And so on until you get to the beginning of the revolution.
Have you seen an example in sort of modern cinema of a resurrection where you're like, hey, they actually got kind of close?
Absolutely. There's a great example of it, and you probably could. I think it's on YouTube, and it's basically Kevin Spacey. Did you ever see that thing where Kevin Spacey's talking about, I really got railroaded? Yeah. He's in the kitchen, and he's got this weird rope.
Yep.
One of the most surreal things to come out of last year, for sure.
He's wearing an apron that has the Santa Clauses on it. Well, that scene, imagine that scene with Steve Buscemi's face on Kevin Spacey.
Okay.
But Kevin Spacey's voice and his personality mapped onto Buscemi's face.
Huh.
And it works.
Really?
Because I think of even like, Marvel's doing a lot of de-aging. Star Wars movies have brought back Tarkin and Leia.
I mean, it's been happening since Benjamin Button was like the beginning
but
of that.
But even those have sort of that uncanny valley where you go, there's something wrong with what I'm looking at. I'm not seeing...
Not too much. Well, I mean, I think the de-aging of what's his name? Brad Pitt, wasn't it?
In Button.
Benjamin Button. That was the weakest work in Benjamin Button. But I thought his aging stuff was really good. But I mean, that was like 10 years ago.
Right.
So I mean, the thing is, it's come a long way, and if you see this Buscemi Spacek thing, it'll
look that up.
Yeah,
you'll see what I mean. I mean, it's like, and it's the uncanny valley has been leapt across.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Do you think that there's going to be a nostalgic love for physical effects that'll ever have like another heyday through the industry? Or do you think that at this point it is so cost prohibitive because so many people have moved away from physical effects that you're seeking out the masters of their craft?
Well, look at The First Man. The First Man has miniatures in it. The spaceship and other shots in that movie are miniatures, and it won Best Visual Effects last year, probably because the actors all voted for it. But and they're tired of superheroes. But anyway, or even Star Wars, which was pretty good work. But then The Force Awakens was another one but I don't know if they had miniature work in it.
A lot of practicals. The idea that in Maz Kanata's place, that what you're seeing is not CG; it's costumes, puppetry.
Right, and then the weird characters, and that animation. So a lot of stuff is being uncovered. I think that in The Force Awakens there was an homage to the early look that we generated for Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, and the reason that it has that look largely is because of blue spill, because the models were all shot against blue screen, and there had to be a certain amount of fill light to cancel out that blue spill, and so therefore there's fill light in space, but that's part of the look of the movie. And nobody complained about that. I mean, that's the look, and they brought that look back into to The Force Awakens.
Where did you see Force Awakens? I mean, did you just like go on opening weekend and
no? I saw it at home in my.
So you didn't get to see a sneak preview or anything. You waited until it was available on home video.
Yeah.
To watch.
Oh, sorry.
No, no apology necessary. I was just thinking like how.
I have a really good.
I imagine your home theater.
The thing that's weird about all this is that you have people that are moving away from the theaters to the devices.
Right, I'm one of them. Unfortunately,
you have lots of people that are watching movies on their computer or on their cell phones. Or at home. And the thing is that a lot of it is because the politeness that used to be in the theaters is not there anymore.
That's why. That's
the
main reason.
Texting and talking, and they're just
I guess
dorks.
Agreed.
I mean, people are. Ladies used to remove their hats.
Please remove your hat
in the theater. You know what I mean?
And smoking was in the balcony.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked the question about
we got a crying room in the back. Get that kid out of here.
Seeing Force Awakens is that you described seeing Star Wars at the Chinese theater,
right?
And that experience with all the elements put together, it was a transformative experience for you, a person who had created and photographed a large and arguably among the most important elements in that movie, and yet to hear it for the first time with the full Williams score. And
well, that's the thing. I mean, I was telling the students this morning that visual effects is kind of like basically a silent business. In other words, the only thing that you hear when you're watching the movie is, "Hey, why didn't you do this over there? You could fix this way," or people would be kibitzing about the shot, but the thing is, and you're going back and forth on the shot, and you're, so when you finally see it running at 24 in the screening room as an element, you say, okay, that's good, we're going to buy that, and then you don't see it again until you get in the theater. Or you see it in optical when it's composited with the other elements, and then you say, okay, that looks good. We'll buy it on take 5, we'll buy it, and then you don't see it until it's in the theater. And when I went to Chinese to see Star Wars, and had great seats, and all of a sudden, on comes the the 6-track stereo and the Far, Far Away and all that stuff, and the titles that I shot going back to infinity, and then all of a sudden you see this monstrous ship coming overhead, and Johnny Williams' store, and the laser blast from Ben Burt, and I mean it's like all of a sudden it comes alive with the music and sound, you know, and it was pretty breathtaking to me even.
When the special editions were released in the late 90s, did you and your cohorts have any part in that at all, or it was just time had passed? And the only reason I bring it up was, so I was born in 85. I watched Star Wars on VHS right before those came out. So I think the same year the first special edition came out was the first year that I had watched Star Wars. So I had the opportunity to watch it without the special edition editions.
Right, with all the,
and then I was able to watch it in the theater. And even, 10-year-old me was going, oh, that looks way different as a computer-only effect than these, because I could tell the shots were added in.
Right.
So could you speak a little bit about where that was then and where you think it is now? You've spoken a little bit about Blue Phil, but did you have any feelings about the special editions when those came out?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when George, came out with the special edition, I met him outside the theater in L.A., and I said, George, I mean, by this time I'd been competing with ILM on jobs, and we get some of them and they get some of them with this new company that I started at Boss. And anyway, so we're standing outside, and I said, George, obviously it's your movie, so you can do whatever you want. There's been rumor after rumor about all these changes that have happened, I said, but, like I said, it's your movie. And he says, Richard, do you remember that shot of the land speeder? And I said, oh, stop right there. And he says, well, I couldn't let the movie go out with that shot like it was. And he says, but then we got carried away. And he even admitted it himself.
And is he referring to getting rid of the Vaseline look underneath the land speeder in Tatooine?
And is that
the
moving,
pink sand,
moving animation,
right.
Yeah.
Blob, moving blob,
right?
Mm-hmm. And you said that one that kind of always made you cringe was because you could see a tire.
Well, you would because Gary shot it
because Gary Kurtz,
too low, and if he'd have moved the camera up 3 feet, it would have been all right.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't, and I wasn't there, so
you weren't in Tunisia.
I wasn't.
You were in California,
nobody was
None
there
of the
for that. I mean, George
Yeah.
wouldn't have let him do that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I mean, I guess that was a second unit shot, and George and Gary shot it, and so anyway, it had to be fixed, and he needed the shot. I mean, there's no way he could do the scene without that shot. And
who was your favorite person to work with during the ILM, the earliest formation of ILM? Was it Dykstra?
Well, yeah, I mean, Dykstra and I were brothers, in the visual effects. So yeah, I mean, John hired me.
Because I mean, I guess where I'm going is John hired you, but then John doesn't come back for Empire, and you have to make a decision.
Well, John had kind of he was very immovable if he felt that he was right, and even if politically it would have been better for him to throw in the towel every now and then, he wouldn't do that. And so, in a sense, I think he kind of he cut himself out of it.
Was he mad at you?
No,
or
not me. It wasn't. It didn't have nothing to do with me.
But when he decided he'd moved on, and you said, "Look, I'm gonna take this job on Empire." We can pause if you wanna. If you want to take that, we can pause.
No, it's a marketing.
Oh, okay. It's a robocall.
Robocall.
I guess his him saying, "Look, I understand that this that you're gonna take this job and kind of take the lead on."
Well, what happened was, right after Star Wars, the group was still together, and John started talking about doing Battlestar Galactica with Glenn Larson, who wanted to get the Star Wars effects team together to do this movie. And Glenn Larson was kind of the king of plagiarism, you know.
Oh yeah, George, was out of his mind angry about Battlestar.
So, well, anyway, so we agreed to do with it, and my caveat was, okay, if you don't make a series out of it, and if you don't make a movie out of it, because we decided to do it in 35 to make it cheaper, and at first I had this terrible optical department that the union stuck me with, and I didn't have anybody that could do a blue screen shot worth of shit, and so basically I had to, well, that happened anyway. So, and then we went ahead and did the 3 shows. And there were some really great shots in the shows, and the thing is that the production designer and the editor, they didn't know what to ask for. So we just did the shots that we thought would be cool for the scenes, and then they would cut them in. And there was one of the sequences, one of the 3 was the copy of the Guns of Navarone. And Glenn Larson was going around the studio with the Guns of Navarone script under his arm, you know. I mean, he just lifted it, and we built this model of the Alpine mountain. It was about the size of this table and about 4 feet high, and it had these micro balloons on it for snow, and the snow was held together by you'd put the micro balloons on, and you spray alcohol, and there was enough stiction with the alcohol where it would make the stuff stay like a fluffy snow, where you had to be careful not hit the table because it and so basically I had this action master outside using the great key light in the sky, and I was shooting at f11 at 360 frames a second, and the shot was magnificent. I mean, then we basically hit the bottom of the table with a hammer, and everything collapsed, and so we had this fantastic avalanche. And I mean, I still got that footage. It's fantastic footage. Awesome. But anyway, so that was one of my favorite shots for Galactica. So anyway, I'm deviating from your question. So anyway, we did Battlestar Galactica, and at the end of that, we formed a company called MCA 57 for some stupid reason. That was the name of the company. I think our phone number ended in 5757 or something like that. So anyway, so at the end of that project, I heard that there were some rumblings going on up north, and that George was going to want to start up and do a second movie. And I told the guys, because we all formed Apogee, and I said, okay, I'm going to count me in on the company, but I just want you to know that if I get the phone call that I'm virtually certain I'm going to get, I'll be leaving. And I'd be stupid not to take this opportunity. Right. And everybody said, yeah, we agree, So that's how I left. And I got the phone call, and I sold my piece of Apogee for $2,500 and moved. I sold my house in Silver Lake and moved into a little cottage for the same money. I had this fabulous architectural house. But anyway, and spent 4.5 years up at ILM and did Empire Strikes Back, Raiders, Poltergeist, and Jedi.
Just a couple just my childhood right there. Do you ever do anything with like live events? Did anyone ever approach you about theme park work or anything like that? Did you ever do anything like that?
I did Expo 93 for we did a ride film for Expo 93 for Lucky Gold Star, and it was the most attended event at the theme. 1 million people saw the show. Whoa! And that was the maximum number that we could have shown it, because it ran every 13 minutes or something like that. And
what was is that a different experience where you think of like, okay, so I mean, it's thrilling, right? You're hoping to get something thrilling, but it's even a little more so when it's under the guise of it's kind of like a ride.
It is a ride, because they're on these iWorks I made a deal with Don Iwerks to use their platforms, and we shot it in VistaVision and blew the VistaVision up to 8 perf 65.
And so they move. Are they on like a gimbal?
Yeah, they're hydraulically operated, and they're kind of motion controlled, so they repeat the same thing each time, and so they jostle the audience around, and it was a really great deal, and we had 2 theaters side by side, going each time. So and both shows had to be in sync, because otherwise there would have been noise going through the walls, because it's pretty loud. And so basically they had the two theaters had to be in sync. We discovered that right away. And so that was a gotta fix this problem.
So there's a learning curve right there, right?
Yeah.
Like learning what that must have been a lot of fun though, right?
It was.
It's just one more step in getting people to experience something they've never experienced before.
Right. We finished that in 92. And I think we only had a $4 million budget for that. It was they got their money's worth out of it.
Well, yeah, if they got 1 million people to go through that thing and they maxed out attendance. As Greg was saying earlier, I'm a massive Ghostbusters fan. So first of all, thank you very much for your hard work on that, because it has influenced just huge chunks of my life. So much so that after we're done here, my wife and I are driving 2 hours away to a haunted hotel for the weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she loves ghost lore, and most of my knowledge comes from it. I'm curious to know, there's a famed first draft of that script that Dan Aykroyd wrote that was like 400 pages long.
I think it was 190.
Well, okay, which is still massively large for a screenplay,
I got
right?
that script. That was the script that Ivan sent me. You want to do Ghostbusters? And I said, yeah, but I don't think Columbia is going to want to spend the money that you're talking about in this script, And so I wound up collaborating with Harold and paring it down to what could be done for $5 million. Because that was what the budget was.
You put every penny of the $5 million up on the screen, for sure. But
then about maybe a month before we were going to be finishing, Ivan wanted to add 100 shots. And I said, Ivan, we got to talk, And so, there's no way we can do another 100 shots. And so he comes out, he drives out. I met him in the parking lot with my samurai sword. I said, we need to do a samurai cut here, Ivan. And we got it down to, I think, 42 additional shots.
Wow. Well, there you go.
And I went over by 700,000.
A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to interview Tom Savini at his school in Pittsburgh. And he talked about how on the set of Django Unchained, Tarantino had this deal where if you solved an issue that a department you didn't belong to was having, you'd get $5. And he told the story about he was walking through set one day and it was a shot where a guy's supposed to get, I think, his arm torn off or something, and they weren't able to get it to work, and it wasn't working. And then Savini came over to Tarantino and said, just dig a hole, put his arm in it, whatever. And a few minutes later, Tarantino came over and handed him a crisp $5 bill, which I thought is just a hilarious story. Is there anything along those lines, incentives that you saw filmmakers do to get the different departments to work against or with each other, just to make things move along?
Well, I have a story that I could tell about with John Milius. John's an old friend of mine. We're shooters. We both collect fancy English shotguns and Italian shotguns. Anyway, he said, Richard, I want you to shoot this scene of these skiffs aboard, arriving on the shoreline of Borneo, but we're going to shoot it in the North Beach of Hawaii, and we're going to wait until we get the word from this surf follow. There's this old surfer that knows the ocean and said, and he'll know when the big waves are going to come. And so we have to be on surf alert for the next period, however long that is. So I'm going along, and I've got this company I'm running, and I got a few hundred employees, right? And I have to, and so basically, one day I get the call, and John says, the guy says, they're coming, man. And so I said, you mean when? He says, we need to get on the plane tomorrow. And so I rounded up 4 cameras, 3 1,200,000 millimeter lenses, and the trick was that there were 3 really seasoned surf photographers that were good at shooting surf movies with 16 millimeter cameras. And so I was going to give them 3 Aries to shoot 35, and then I had my camera that with a like 100 millimeter lens for just another shot, and so I was going to operate that one, and so basically, because John had shot Big Wednesday in the North Beach. And so he's like canonized by the surfers that live up there. And there's this guy named Eddie. And Eddie Ruffman is this little Jewish guy from Chicago that has kind of taken over the leadership of the Hui. And the Hui are these surfers that are like big, tough, usually like half Hawaiian, half Samoan. They're just these monster surfers, and they wear these black trunks with a chartreuse stripe down the side. And if anybody sees them coming, they give them wide berth.
It's a surfer gang. You're describing a surfer gang instead of bikers, but surfing.
Oh, yeah, we're talking, and Eddie controls these guys. Nothing happens in the North Shore without Eddie. And he still does it. I was just meeting with Jamilius like the last Sunday. We were talking about Eddie. And Eddie still runs the North Shore.
That's fantastic.
And so we get, and Terry Leonard, who's this fantastic stunt guy, legendary. With like Yakima Canute, that kind of level of stunt guy. Anyway, so Terry's like one of the guys in one of the skiffs, and there are these 2 skiffs, and they're playing these guys who they've been lost at sea for like 2 weeks, and they finally wash up on the shores of Borneo, which is controlled at the time by the Japanese. The Japanese are controlling the perimeter of Borneo, but they can't go inland because the headhunters have these poison darts, and they're real accurate.
Oh my God!
And so this is a movie that John wrote called Farewell to the King, and there was a book that was written about this guy, and there was supposedly there was an actual situation that happened like this. So anyway, these 4 guys that were on this skiff after the Battle of Corregidor, after Second World War, right during the Second World War, wash up on they come through these monstrous waves. I thought these waves are like 20 feet. They're just enormous waves, 20, 25, 30 feet waves. They'd crash on the shore, and the cameras would shake. It was like this big hammer hit and so basically, I wound up getting an hour of footage because the guys kept reloading and shooting, and they would go shooting up this. They would go shooting up the face of the wave and disappear in the back, and I'd say, "Oh, it's all over," and then there they are. Wow! And so I got, and not only that, but the sky was gray, and there was this godlight shooting through the sky. It was like it couldn't have been a more beautiful day for this. And my pay. You were talking about the $5 from. I got a case of shotgun shells out of this.
Italian shotgun shells?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they were Fiocchi's.
You and my uncle would have a lot to talk about just on the guns alone. And as a matter of fact, we're kind of getting close to the end here,
right.
But and this podcast will be coming out after the Fargo Film Festival has wrapped up. But maybe Greg, you could take the lead on this too. The very special reason why we have Mr. Edlund here for this festival.
Well, he's the recipient of the highest honor of the film festival in Fargo. It's called the Ted M. Larson Award, and that's named after the professor of film studies who started teaching 4-credit classes, in the 1960s, at a time when you have to be on the coast to be able to get college credit for film studies. And he was a mentor to many people, including myself. And so I don't know how old I was when I learned, Richard, that you were born in Fargo, but I thought I'm sure I've told this story many times to different people, but I thought it struck me. I mean, it kind of awestruck me that it seemed like suddenly things were possible because you were from the same town, and so I think we used the line, and in fact Efren Ramirez, who was at the Fargo Film Festival last night, said just a different version of you is the line, right? That's also used in the Norman Lear as the title of the Norman Lear documentary. It's on Norman Lear had a bumper sticker on his car that said just a different version of you, as a way to think about, that you shouldn't be bound by, limitations you place on yourself. So right. We've wanted to make this happen for a long time, and finally, the timing worked out for a return visit. Because when's the last time you were in Fargo?
It's about 10 years ago.
Been about 10 years.
My cousin Joe hosted a family reunion, so I came back for that.
Yeah, and your cousin Joe and family members are going to come to the
Joe and
show
his
tonight.
wife Joyce, and I think either his brother Roger or one other. Yeah, it could be 4, but it's probably 3.
Uh-huh. So that's in a nutshell why we're graced by the presence of Richard Edlund.
Well, and the Ted Larson Award is not one that just gets awarded every year. There have been gaps where it just wasn't awarded because there wasn't a candidate.
And I don't know if Richard knows this, but some of the other recipients of this award include Leonard Maltin and Janet Leigh, George Romero. Janet Leigh, yeah, because she came to Fargo with the Library of Congress Film Preservation Tour and made Ted's acquaintance, and they kind of became friendly. And
nice.
Yeah, and so John Waters and George Romero, are 2 pretty well-known filmmakers who've accepted the award. So it doesn't always go to a famous person, but it goes to a noteworthy, a person who's made contributions to the industry or to film education. And in the case of Richard Edlund, it hits absolutely every criteria you could imagine, and then some.
Yeah. Are there filmmakers out there right now that you're up and coming that you're really interested in, or films that are coming out these days that excite you?
Well, I have a graphic. I have a novel that I've owned the rights to for many years called The Forever War.
Oh, I've heard. Yeah, okay.
And that's set up at Columbia. At Warner's now, with Channing Tatum. But we have to get a script that's good.
Okay.
And we don't have one yet. So we're still working on it.
Can't you be like, hey, I've got a Gambit movie for you, Channing? Because I know he's been trying to get that movie off the ground for a couple of years. But now with that acquisition, I don't know if that's going to happen.
I don't know. Anyway, he's perfect for the role. So,
Well, listen, let's wrap this up with something I wanted to say to you this whole time. I saw Poltergeist for the first time ever on VHS at a sleepover with some friends. And I was so freaked out that I peed in my sleeping bag and had to go home with James because I was not going to walk by the television to get to the restroom. And so thank you so much for making 4th grade unbearable for me.
That's such a great
was
anecdote.
It 3rd grade?
It was fourth grade
for JJ. So and to tag on to that, and I shared this story with Richard earlier. During 2010, the year we make contact, I was in the back of the Safari Theater having my first kiss in a movie. But I told him I always made sure to watch all the special effects parts. So
just during the boring talking parts, that's when you were smooching?
I was pretty afraid of the Rancor at the very beginning, but that was about it.
There you go.
Well,
yeah, thanks for making our lives all the richer and all the more fantastic.
Well, thanks for buying tickets
Gladly.
Because you are our patrons. Without avid ticket buyers, we wouldn't, have a job.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com and you can find direct contact info for JJ. I actually peed my pants at a couple of sleepovers, and one of them was because my friends' parents' faces melted off like they did in Raiders, so I guess I should have brought that up too.